Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Che and this is a web of classic tales. If you're enjoying the videos, please like, subscribe, share and comment. If you want notifications every single time a new video is uploaded, please click on the little bell icon. Today we will begin reading The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton by Charles Dickens. In an old abbey town down in this part of the country a long while ago, so long that the story must be a true one, because our great-grandfathers implicitly believed it, there officiated as sexton and gravedigger in the churchyard one Gabriel Grub. It by no means follows that because a man is a sexton, and constantly surrounded by the emblems of mortality, therefore he should be a morose and melancholy man. Your undertakers are the merriest fellows in the world, and I once had the honour of being on intimate terms with a mute, who in private life and off duty was as comical and jocose a little fellow as ever chirped out a devil-may-care song without a hitch in his memory, or drained off a good stiff glass without stopping for breath. Notwithstanding these precedents to the contrary, Gabriel Grub was an ill-conditioned, cross-grained, surly fellow, a morose and lonely man, who consorted with nobody but himself and an old wicker bottle which fitted into his large, deep waistcoat pocket, and who eyed each merry face as it passed him by with such a deep scowl of malice and ill-humour as it was difficult to meet without feeling something the worse for. A little before twilight one Christmas Eve, Gabriel shouldered his spade, lighted his lantern, and betook himself towards the old churchyard, for he had got a grave to finish by next morning, and, feeling very low, he thought it might raise his spirits, perhaps, if he went on with his work at once. As he went his way up the ancient street, he saw the cheerful light of the blazing fires gleam through the old casements, and heard the loud laugh and the cheerful shouts of those who were assembled around them. He marked the bustling preparations for next day's cheer, and smelt the numerous savoury odours consequent thereupon as they steamed up from the kitchen windows in clouds. All this was gall and wormwood to the heart of Gabriel Grub. And when groups of children bounded out of the house, tripped across the road, and were met, before they could knock at the opposite door, by half a dozen curly-headed rascals, who crowded round them as they flocked upstairs to spend the evening in their Christmas games, Gabriel smiled grimly and clutched the handle of his spade with a firmer grasp, as he thought of measles, scarlet fever, thrush, whooping cough, and a good many other sources of consolation besides. In this happy frame of mind, Gabriel strode along, returning a short, sullen growl to the good-humoured greetings of such of his neighbours as now and then passed him, until he turned into the dark lane which led to the churchyard. Now, Gabriel had been looking forward to reaching the dark lane, because it was, generally speaking, a nice, gloomy, mournful place, into which the townspeople did not much care to go, except in broad daylight, and when the sun was shining. Consequently, he was not a little indignant to hear a young urchin roaring out some jolly song about a Merry Christmas in this very sanctuary which had been called Coffin Lane ever since the days of the old abbey and the time of the shaven-headed monks. As Gabriel walked on, and the voice drew nearer, he found it proceeded from a small boy who was hurrying along to join one of the little parties in the old street, and who, partly to keep himself company, and partly to prepare himself for the occasion, was shouting out the song at the highest pitch of his lungs. So Gabriel waited until the boy came up, and then dodged him into a corner and rapped him over the head with his lantern 5 or 6 times, just to teach him to modulate his voice. And as the boy hurried away with his hand to his head, singing quite a different sort of tune, Gabriel chuckled very heartily to himself and entered the churchyard, locking the gate behind him. He took off his coat, set down his lantern, and getting into the unfinished grave, worked at it for an hour or so with a right good will. But the earth was hardened with the frost, and it was no very easy matter to break it up and shovel it out. And although there was a moon, it was a very young one, and shed little light upon the grave, which was in the shadow of the church. At any other time, these obstacles would have made Gabriel Grub very moody and miserable, but he was so well pleased with having stopped the small boy's singing that he took little heed of the scanty progress he had made, and looked down into the grave, when he had finished work for the night, with grim satisfaction, murmuring as he gathered up his things, "Brave lodgings for one, brave lodgings for one, a few feet of cold earth when life is done, a stone at the head, a stone at the feet, rich juicy meal for the worms to eat, rank grass overhead, and damp clay around, brave lodgings for one, these in holy ground. Ho ho! Laughed Gabriel Grub as he sat himself down on a flat tombstone, which was a favourite resting place of his, and drew forth his wicker bottle. A coffin at Christmas, a Christmas box. Ho ho ho! Ho ho ho! Repeated a voice which sounded close behind him. Gabriel paused in some alarm, in the act of raising the wicker bottle to his lips, and looked round. The bottom of the oldest grave about him was not more still and quiet than the churchyard in the pale moonlight. The cold hoar frost glistened on the tombstone, and sparkled like rows of gems among the stone carvings of the old church. The snow lay hard and crisp upon the ground, and spread over the thickly strewn mounds of earth, so white and smooth, a cover that it seemed as if corpses lay there, hidden only by their winding sheets. Not the faintest rustle broke the profound tranquillity of the solemn scene. Sound itself appeared to be frozen up. All was so cold and still. It was the echoes, said Gabriel Grub, raising the bottle to his lips again. It was not, said a deep voice. Gabriel started up, and stood rooted to the spot with astonishment and terror, for his eyes rested on the form that made his blood run cold. Seated on an upright tombstone close to him was a strange, unearthly figure, whom Gabriel felt at once was no being of this world. His long, fantastic legs, which might have reached the ground, were cocked up and crossed after a quaint, fantastic fashion. His sinewy arms were bare, and his hands rested on his knees. On his short, round body he wore a close covering, ornamented with small slashes. A short cloak dangled at his back. The collar was cut into curious peaks, which served the goblin in lieu of ruff or neckerchief, and his shoes curled up at his toes into long points. On his head he wore a broad-brimmed sugar-loaf hat, garnished with a single feather. The hat was covered with the white frost, and the goblin looked as if he had sat on that same tombstone very comfortably for 200 or 300 years. He was sitting perfectly still. His tongue was put out, as if in derision, and he was grinning at Gabriel Grub with such a grin as only a goblin could call up. It was not the echoes, said the goblin. Gabriel Grub was paralyzed and could make no reply. What do you do here on Christmas Eve? Said the goblin sternly. I came to dig a grave, sir, stammered Gabriel Grub. What man wanders among graves and churchyards on such a night as this? Cried the goblin. Gabriel Grub! Gabriel Grub! Screamed a wild chorus of voices that seemed to fill the churchyard. Gabriel looked fearfully round. Nothing was to be seen. What have you got in that bottle? Said the goblin. Hollands, sir, replied the sexton, trembling more than ever, for he had bought it of the smugglers, and he thought that perhaps his questioner might be in the excise department of the Goblins. Who drinks Hollands alone in a churchyard on such a night as this? Said the goblin. Gabriel Grub! Gabriel Grub! Exclaimed the wild voices again. The goblin leered maliciously at the terrified sexton, and then, raising his voice, exclaimed, And who, then, is our fair and lawful prize? To this inquiry the invisible chorus replied, in a strain that sounded like the voices of many choristers singing to the mighty swell of the old church organ, a strain that seemed borne to the sexton's ears upon a wild wind, and to die away as it passed onward. But the burden of the reply was still the same. Gabriel Grub! Gabriel Grub! The goblin grinned a broader grin than before, as he said, Well, Gabriel, what do you say to this? The sexton gasped for breath. What do you think of this, Gabriel? Said the goblin, kicking up his feet in the air on either side of the tombstone, and looking at the turned-up points with as much complacency as if he had been contemplating the most fashionable pair of Wellingtons in all Bond Street. It's very curious, sir, replied the sexton, half dead with fright. Very curious and very pretty, but I think I'll go back and finish my work, sir, if you please. Work? Said the goblin. What work? The grave, sir. Making the grave, stammered the sexton. Oh, the grave, said the goblin. Who makes graves at such a time when all other men are merry, and takes a pleasure in it? Again the mysterious voices replied, Gabriel Grub! Gabriel Grub! I am afraid my friends want you, Gabriel, said the goblin, thrusting his tongue farther into his cheek than ever, and a most astonishing tongue it was. I'm afraid my friends want you, Gabriel, said the goblin. Under favour, sir, replied the horror-stricken sexton. I don't think they can, sir. They don't know me, sir. I don't think the gentlemen have ever seen me, sir. Oh, yes, they have, replied the goblin. We know the man with the sulky face and grim scowl that came down the street tonight, throwing his evil looks at the children and grasping his burying spade the tighter. We know the man who struck the boy in the envious malice of his heart, because the boy could be merry and he could not. We know him. We know him. Here the goblin gave a loud, shrill laugh, which the echoes returned 20-fold, and throwing his legs up in the air, stood upon his head, or rather upon the very point of his sugar-loaf hat, on the narrow edge of the tombstone, whence he threw a somerset with extraordinary agility, right to the sexton's feet, at which he planted himself in the attitude in which tailors generally sit upon the shop-board. I'm afraid I must leave you, sir, said the sexton, making an effort to move. Leave us, said the goblin. Gabriel Grub is going to leave us, ho! As the goblin laughed, the sexton observed for one instant a brilliant illumination within the windows of the church, as if the whole building were lighted up. It disappeared. The organ pealed forth a lively air, and whole troops of goblins, the very counterpart of the first one, poured into the churchyard and began playing at leapfrog with the tombstones, never stopping for an instant to take breath, but overing the highest among them, one after the other, with the most marvellous dexterity. The first goblin was a most astonishing leaper, and none of the others could come near him. Even in the extremity of his terror, the sexton could not help observing that, while his friends were content to leap over the common-sized gravestones, the first one took the family vaults, iron railings and all, with as much ease as if they had been so many street posts. At last the game reached to a most exciting pitch. The organ played quicker and quicker, and the goblins leaped faster and faster, coiling themselves up, rolling head over heels upon the ground, and bounding over the tombstones like footballs. The sexton's brain whirled round with the rapidity of the motion he beheld, and his legs reeled beneath him as the spirits flew before his eyes, when the Goblin King, suddenly darting towards him, laid his hand upon his collar, and sank with him through the earth. Thank you for listening. This has been Charles Dickens' The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton, Part 1. I've been Jay. This has been a web of classic tales. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, click the bell icon for notifications. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Have a nice life, and I'll see you next time.